This is a story based on real events in the life of Soraya, a young Libyan girl who was kidnapped at the age of 15 and kept as a sex slave in the secret harem of dictator Muammar Gaddafi. Some scenes were adapted for dramatic and narrative purposes. If you also believe that giving these women a voice is important, consider subscribing to the channel.
Do you know what happens when a dictator chooses you? When he puts his hand on your head in front of everyone and smiles as if he's blessing you. I'll tell you, your life ends right there, in that second. I was 15 years old. 15, the same age as so many girls watching this now, laughing with their friends, worried about math tests, in love with someone at school. I was like that too, until I wasn't anymore. Everyone talks about power, but no one talks about what it actually does. It's not just about controlling a country, making laws, giving orders. It's about controlling bodies, breaking wills, turning people into objects, and doing all this while the whole world watches, applauds, and does business with you. Some people will say this is a lie, that it's an exaggeration, that these things don't really happen, but they do. They happened to me. They happened to hundreds of other girls who, even today, are afraid to speak out. Because in a society where rape is blamed on the victim, speaking out is the same as condemning oneself. But I will speak because silence is not protection, it's imprisonment. And I've been imprisoned for far too long.
The smell of hair chemicals always calmed me. Sounds strange, right? But that's how it was. That mix of shampoo, dye, styling cream, all mixed with the warm air of my mother's salon. It was the smell of home, of safety, of normalcy. I spent my afternoons there after school, sweeping hair off the floor, handing out clean towels to clients, listening to the women's conversations. They talked about everything, husbands, children, soap operas, recipes, and I would stay there, quietly, absorbing that little world that seemed so simple, so predictable. I was 15 years old and had my whole life ahead of me. At least, that's what I thought. My mother was Tunisian. She came to Libya young, full of dreams. She opened the salon with her own hands, client by client. I saw her pride every time I looked around. It was hers, built by her, earned through her sweat. And I wanted to be like that too, strong, independent, capable of forging my own path. Maybe I would be a teacher or a doctor or I don't know. Anything that would make me feel useful, that would make me feel alive. Sirte was a small town by the sea. The wind carried that salty taste that clung to your lips. And the afternoons were always golden, with a light that made everything more beautiful than it really was. I liked to walk along the shore before going to the salon, feel the warm sand beneath my feet, listen to the seagulls. It was in those moments that I dreamed. About silly things, perhaps. About a boyfriend who treated me well. About a graduation. About a life different from the one my mother had. Not that hers was bad, but I wanted more. I wanted to choose. But choice, I would soon discover, is a luxury not everyone has. One morning, at the beginning of spring, everything changed. I was at school, somewhat bored with history class. Ironically, we were studying about revolution, about freedom, about the glorious leader who liberated us from oppression. Yes, because in Gaddafi's Libya, everything was about him. The guide, the brother leader, the protector of the nation. We grew up hearing that he was almost a god, a superior being who chose to take care of us. There was a picture of him in every classroom, in every public building, on every street corner. And we had to love him. It wasn't optional. I remember looking at that portrait on the wall, him in sunglasses, that smile that never quite reached his eyes, his impeccable military uniform, and thinking, is he happy? Do powerful people feel the same things we do? It seemed so distant, so unreal, as if he lived on another planet, not in the same Libya as me. It was on that day that the principal entered the room, all agitated, with that kind of nervous excitement that makes you realize something big is about to happen. She clapped her hands to get everyone's attention and announced, her voice trembling with emotion, "Girls and boys, we have wonderful news. The guide, our beloved leader, will honor us with a visit next week." The room erupted. Shouts, applause, that somewhat forced euphoria we learn from childhood. You had to celebrate. You had to look happy. You had to show gratitude, because if you didn't, someone would notice, and in Libya, being perceived the wrong way was dangerous. I applauded too, of course. But inside, I don't know. I was more curious than excited. It was going to be the first time I'd see the guide up close. The man who dominated every conversation, every news report, every thought aloud in the country. It was going to be strange to see him in the flesh, to discover that he was human like us. The director continued, "And we need some students to welcome the guide with flowers and gifts. Exemplary students who represent the best of our school." My heart skipped a beat. Not because I wanted to be chosen. In fact, I preferred to stay in the background, invisible, as I always had been. But there was something about the way the director spoke, the weight in her words, that made me uneasy, as if being chosen was much more than a simple honor. At the end of class, when the list came out, my name was there, along with 5 other girls. I was one of those chosen to deliver the bouquet of flowers. My friends hugged me, all excited, saying I was lucky, that it was a unique opportunity, and I smiled, thanked them, and pretended to be happy. But I had a knot in my stomach that I couldn't explain. I ran to my mother's salon as soon as class ended. I wanted to tell her, share the news, maybe hear that everything was okay, that it was normal to feel that nervousness. The doorbell rang as I entered, and the smell of chemicals enveloped me again, calming me down a little. My mother was finishing a lady's hairstyle, her skillful fingers braiding the strands with the precision that only years of practice bring. She looked at me in the mirror and smiled, but the smile vanished when she saw my face. "What is it, Habibti?" she asked, using the affectionate Arabic term that always made me feel protected. "Mom, I was chosen to receive the guide at school. I'm going to give him flowers." The silence that followed was strange, heavy. The client looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Was it fear, envy, pity? My mother dropped the comb, came to me, and cupped my face in her hands. They were cold. This is a great honor, my daughter," she said, but her voice didn't match her words. Something was wrong. Something was left unsaid. "Aren't you happy?" I asked, confused. She took a deep breath and forced another smile. "I am, of course I am. It's just that you're so young. You're still my little girl." I laughed, trying to lighten the mood. "Mom, I'm just going to deliver flowers. It's nothing special." She hugged me tightly at that moment, too tightly, as if she were trying to protect me from something that hadn't happened yet, as if she already knew. But I didn't know anything. The following days were madness. Rehearsals at school, choosing the right dress, instructions on how to behave, how to speak, how to walk. Everything had to be perfect. The guide deserved perfection. The etiquette teacher kept repeating, eyes downcast, discreet smile, upright posture. You represent Libyan youth, the promise of the future, the gratitude of a nation. I rehearsed each movement as if it were a choreography. And as the day approached, the knot in my stomach grew bigger. The night before, I barely slept. I kept tossing and turning in bed, imagining what it would be like. Would he talk to me? Would he smile? Would he notice I was nervous? I wanted to do everything right, not disappoint the school, not disappoint my mother, not disappoint, I don't know, everyone. When the day finally arrived, the sun rose hotter than usual. Or perhaps it was just my imagination, my whole body on alert, every sense heightened. I put on the white outfit they had chosen for me, simple, modest, innocent. I tied my hair up in a low bun. I applied a little lip gloss, just so I wouldn't look so pale. My mother looked at me before I left, and her eyes were red. She hadn't slept either. Be strong, Habibti, she whispered. And I didn't understand why I needed to be strong to deliver a bouquet of flowers. The school auditorium was packed. Teachers, students, staff, everyone nervous, dressed up, waiting. We, the chosen girls, stood at the front, lined up like little soldiers. I held the bouquet so tightly that my fingers were white. Red roses. Their sweet scent made me feel a little nauseous, but I took deep breaths, trying to calm myself. Then he arrived. The murmur ceased instantly, a heavy, oppressive, almost religious silence. I heard the footsteps before I saw him, firm, measured, accompanied by the clinking of women's high heels, his famous guards, those women in uniform and sunglasses who looked like they'd stepped out of an action movie. And then I saw. He was smaller than I had imagined, older. His skin marked by time, his hair with that artificial tone of cheap dye. But there was something about him, a presence, a strength that made everyone shrink, as if the air around him were denser, harder to breathe. He walked around the auditorium, waving, smiling that smile that never quite reached his eyes. And then he stopped in front of me. My heart stopped too. I held out the bouquet with trembling hands. He took it, but didn't look at the flowers. He looked at me, straight into my eyes. And in that look, there was something that chilled me to the bone, something that wasn't admiration, wasn't kindness. It was possessiveness. He took my free hand and kissed it lightly. His skin was rough, his lips dry. The touch lasted longer than it should have. Then he squeezed my shoulder, ran his hand through my hair, and stroked my head with that calculated gentleness. Everyone applauded. They thought it was beautiful. Paternal. The guide blessing a young woman. But I felt it. I sensed something wrong with that touch, something my body understood before my mind. A shiver that wasn't from cold, it was a warning, a sign of danger. When he left, I was trembling. The other girls were laughing excitedly, saying it had been perfect, but I couldn't smile, because something had changed. I didn't know what, I didn't know how, but it had. The next day, I was in my mother's salon, sweeping the floor, trying to get back to normal. But normal was over. I just didn't know it yet. The door slammed open. The bell rang too loudly, aggressively, 3 women entered, military uniforms, dark glasses, stern expressions. I recognized one of them. She had been beside the guide the day before. My mother dropped the scissors. The sound of the metal hitting the floor echoed in the sudden silence. Soraya needs to come with us, said the tallest woman, the one in the most ornate uniform. The guide wants to see her again. She was so charming yesterday that he personally requested her presence. My mother instinctively positioned herself in front of me. She has school tomorrow. She's a girl. She needs to... The guide doesn't make requests, the woman interrupted, her voice as cold as ice. He gives orders, and when the guide orders, we obey. You should be proud too. Your daughter was chosen. I looked at my mother. I saw the fear in her eyes, the silent despair, but I also saw surrender, because in Gaddafi's Libya, you don't say no, never. I grabbed my bag, my hands trembling. My mother hugged me and whispered in my ear, "Come back to me. Promise you'll come back." And I promised, because I still believed I could. The car was waiting, black, with tinted windows, engine running. I got into the back seat. The door slammed shut behind me, and the sound was like a cell closing. As we walked away, I looked out the window. I saw my mother in the doorway of the salon, her hand over her mouth, her shoulders trembling. And that's when I understood. That tap on the head had not been a blessing. It had been a choice. And I had been chosen. The car was flying down the road. That wasn't a figure of speech. It literally flew. The wheels barely touching the asphalt, the speed blurring everything around me. I was squeezed between 2 of the women in uniform, my seatbelt too tight, my heart beating faster than the engine. I tried to start a conversation. You know when you're nervous and you just say anything to fill the silence. That's it. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice coming out higher than I wanted. "I'm going back home today, right? My mom will be worried if I..." "Silence," interrupted the woman to my left, without even looking at me. I swallowed hard. I looked out the window. The city was behind me. Now it was just desert, endless sand golden under the afternoon sun, undulating like a sea frozen in time. Normally I found the desert beautiful, almost mesmerizing. But now it seemed like something else, empty, indifferent. The kind of place where screams don't echo, where no one will hear you. The woman in the front seat, the one who had entered the hall, the tallest one, the one who seemed to be in charge of everything, turned to me. Even with my sunglasses on, I could feel the weight of her gaze. "You're going to behave." It wasn't a question. It was an order. "You're going to do everything you tell me. You're going to be polite, kind, and grateful. Understand?" Grateful for what? Slipped out of my mouth before I could think straight. The silence that followed was the kind that freezes the blood. She took off her glasses slowly, very slowly, and I saw her eyes for the first time. Dark, hard, without any trace of humanity. "Because the guide noticed you," she said, each word measured. "Dangerous. Thousands of girls in Libya dream of this. You should be thanking him, not asking questions." My whole body was screaming that something was very, very wrong. But I was young, inexperienced. I still had that silly naivete of thinking that things made sense, that adults followed rules, that the world was at least minimally fair. So I tried to believe it. I tried to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, it really was an honor, that I was being paranoid, that my mother was exaggerating her fear. We drove for hours, or at least it felt like hours, I didn't have a watch, I didn't have a cell phone, I didn't have anything to give me a sense of time, only the sun dragging itself across the sky, preparing to plunge below the horizon. When we finally stopped, it was already getting dark. And in the middle of nowhere, something appeared that looked like it came straight out of a movie. A luxurious campsite. It wasn't your average camping tent, no. They were enormous tents, white and gold, with expensive fabrics swaying in the desert breeze, Persian rugs on the sand, refined furniture, soft lights illuminating everything with that warm, artificial glow of sophistication. It was beautiful, frighteningly beautiful. They took me inside one of the smaller tents. Inside there was a bed, a large mirror, a rack full of clothes, a table with makeup and perfumes, and more women. 3 or 4, all older than me, with professional, indifferent expressions. "Take off your clothes," said one of them, a short woman with an accent I didn't recognize. "What?" I laughed nervously, thinking I had misunderstood. "Take off your clothes. I need to take your measurements." I looked around, searching for an explanation, for something that would make sense of it all. But I only found empty, hurried stares, as if I were just another task on their to-do list. I don't understand. I just came to deliver flowers. The tall woman in the dark glasses, I later found out her name was Mabruka, and that name would haunt me forever, entered the tent. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. And in that look was such a clear threat that my body obeyed before my mind could process it. I took off my clothes trembling. And when I say trembling, I don't mean dramatic, it was literal. Every muscle in my body in silent panic. They measured me. Height, waist, hips, bust. They wrote everything down in a little notebook. They asked my bra size, my shoe size, if I had any allergies. Then they took me to a makeshift bathroom. They filled a bathtub with water that was too hot, added oils that smelled of roses and something else. Something nauseating. They told me to get in. One of them started scrubbing me with those rough sponges that leave your skin red. She washed my hair with a different shampoo, combed it carefully, and applied conditioner. It was mechanical, efficient, as if I were a doll being prepared for display. Then came the worst part, the waxing, complete. And when I say complete, I mean complete. They removed every inch of hair from my body. I bit my lip until I tasted blood to keep from crying. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Then a nurse came, blonde, light-eyed, with a Slavic accent. She barely spoke to me. She just tied a rubber band around my arm and stuck a needle in. She drew blood. 3 little tubes full of that dark red blood that was mine, but looked like someone else's. "What's the point of that?" I tried to ask. She didn't answer. She just put on a Band-Aid and left. They dressed me next. Not the clothes I had arrived in, those vanished, as if they had never existed. They put me in something I had never worn in my life. A dress, if I could even call it a dress. A neckline that showed things my mother always taught me to cover. Fabric so thin it felt like I was naked. And underneath, panties that were basically a thong. I wanted to scream that this was wrong, that I wasn't that kind of girl, that my family was decent, respectable. But the words wouldn't come out. They were stuck in my throat, mixed with fear, and that horrible feeling that I had lost control over my own body. They did my makeup, heavy eyeshadow, exaggerated blush on my cheeks, red lipstick that made my lips look like someone else's. They let my hair down, styled it in waves, and sprayed me with such a strong perfume that it made me dizzy. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. There was a woman. Not a 15-year-old girl, a woman painted, styled, exposed, and I hated every second of it, every inch of that image that wasn't mine, but that they forced me to be. "Ready?" Mabruka declared, examining me from head to toe as if I were cattle at market. "The guide is waiting." My stomach churned. I began to understand. I started to put the pieces together. And the image that formed was so terrible that my mind tried to reject it, tried to find another explanation, any other explanation. "Wait, I'm just going to talk to him, right?" My voice came out as a desperate whisper. Mabruka smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. It was a crack in the ice. "You'll do whatever he wants," she said simply, "and you'll thank him later." They took me to another tent, bigger, more luxurious, more expensive carpets, more refined furniture, and in the center, a huge bed covered with red silk sheets. He was there, sitting on the edge of the bed, shirtless, wearing nothing actually, completely naked, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I froze, my whole body locked up. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe properly, I couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. He looked at me and smiled. That same smile he had when he touched my head at school, only now, without witnesses, without cameras, without the mask of a benevolent leader. That smile showed what he truly was. Hunger. "Come here," he said, patting the bed beside him. "Don't be afraid." But how could I not be afraid? How? I shook my head, my eyes filling with tears. "I can't. I never." The words came out jumbled, without meaning. His expression changed. The smile vanished, and in its place came something worse. Anger. "You dare refuse me?" "I just want to go home," I sobbed. "Please, just let me go home." He stood up, and I retreated until I had nowhere left to retreat. But he didn't come at me. Not yet. He opened the tent door and shouted, "Mabruka!" She appeared in seconds. "That bitch isn't cooperating." He spat the words. "Teach her how things work around here, and bring her back when she understands." I was dragged outside. Mabruka took me to another tent, smaller and darker. He pushed me inside. "Sit down," he ordered. I sat down, my legs trembling. She crouched down in front of me, gripped my chin tightly, and forced me to look into her eyes. "Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. You're not leaving, not today, not tomorrow, not whenever you want. You're staying until he gets tired of you. It could be days, it could be weeks, it could be years. And you're going to do everything, absolutely everything he tells you to. Because if you don't, your family will pay. Your mother, your father, your siblings, if you have any. They'll disappear. Understand? But that can't be." "It can," she interrupted. "And it happens every day with girls like you who think they're special, who think they can say no. But they can't. Nobody can. He's the guide. He owns this country. And if he wants you, you're his." She let go of my face and stood up. "Now get up, dry those tears, fix your makeup, and go do what you need to do. I don't know how I got back. I don't know how my legs carried me back to that tent, back to that bed, back to that man who would destroy everything I was in a matter of minutes. What happened next? I don't need to say. You already know. Everyone knows what happens when a powerful man locks a girl in a room and no one comes to her rescue. It was dirty. It was painful. It was the death of everything I thought I was. When it was over, when he finally dismissed me with a dismissive wave of his hand, I could barely walk. Mabruka picked me up, took me back to a tent. He threw me a towel. "Clean up this mess," he said, without a shred of compassion. I sat there alone, bleeding, broken, and cried for the first time for real. I cried for the girl I was that morning, for the life that had been stolen from me, for the innocence that would never return. I fell asleep right there on the cold floor, wrapped in the towel. I didn't have the strength for anything anymore. The next day, when the sun rose and I was still processing the nightmare my life had become, Mabruka appeared again. "Get up. Let's go to Tripoli." "Tripoli? But my home is in Sirte. I need to—" "You no longer have a home in Sirte," she said, her voice emotionless. "Your home is now wherever the guide tells you to, and he wants you in Bab al-Azizia." They threw me back into a car. A few more hours on the road. I wasn't crying anymore. I was too empty to cry. When we arrived, I saw for the first time the complex that would become my prison. Bab al-Azizia, the heart of power. High walls, armed guards, luxury everywhere. But luxury doesn't mean freedom. Sometimes luxury is just a well-decorated cell. They led me through corridors, downstairs, down more stairs. We entered a basement, damp, smelling of mold mixed with cheap perfume. There were doors, several doors, and behind each one, "This is your room." Mabruka opened one of the doors. Inside, a bed, a small table, a dim light. And sitting on the bed, looking at me with eyes as dead as I felt, was another girl. She couldn't have been more than 17. "Hi," she said, her voice faint. "Welcome to the Harem." And that's when I understood that I wasn't alone. There were others, dozens of others, all imprisoned, all broken, all chosen. The door locked behind me, and the sound of that lock was the sound of my previous life ending for good. Have you ever stopped to think about what it means to wait, like to really wait? Not that pleasant kind of waiting you do when you're counting down the days to your birthday or the weekend or your vacation. It's the other kind, the kind of waiting that eats you up inside. That makes every minute feel like an hour, every hour like a whole day. The kind of waiting that has no end marked on the calendar, that has no promise of relief. I lived waiting. Waiting for the door to open, waiting for the footsteps in the hallway, waiting for that voice that I learned to hate more than anything in the world. The master is waiting. Mabruka, always her, with that impeccable uniform, those soulless eyes, that smile that wasn't a smile. She was like a shadow, appearing without warning, dragging you to hell, and disappearing until the next time. The basement of Bab al-Azizia was divided into small rooms. Cells, actually, but nobody called them that. They were rooms. As if a nicer name could change what that place truly was. A prison. Each locked door held a story, a girl, a personal nightmare that repeated itself day after day. My roommate's name was Layla. Long black hair, brown eyes that no longer sparkled. She had been there for 2 years when I arrived. 2 years. I can't even imagine. She explained the rules to me on the very first day, with that tired voice of someone who had already repeated them to other girls before me. When they call you, you go. There's no point in resisting. It only makes things worse. He likes submission, so you pretend. Turn off your mind, go somewhere else, and let your body do what it has to do. For how long? I asked, still clinging to that silly hope that it would end. Or when will he let me go? She looked at me with such deep pity that it hurt more than anything he had done to me. When he gets tired, it could be months, it could be years, or it could never be, never. The word echoed within me, settling in my chest like a stone. The first few weeks were the worst. Not because the violence was different, it was always the same, always brutal, always degrading, but because I was still fighting, still trying to be myself, still crying afterward, still feeling. He would call me almost every night, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. There was never a pattern, never any predictability. It was intentional, I understood later, to keep us always on alert, always waiting, always overwhelmed with anxiety. And he had ways of making everything worse. It wasn't just the act itself, it was everything around it. He forced you to drink whiskey, even if you'd never drunk in your life. He made you snort cocaine, and you felt your heart race, your head spin, your body cease to be yours. He showed you pornographic films and expected you to copy them, as if you were an actress on a set you never asked to be on. "Pay attention," he said, pointing to the screen. "This is how I want it." And Mabruka, always present, always watching, reinforced. It's your homework. Learn it properly. Homework, as if that were school. As if there were any logic, any normality in that hell. There was one time I really tried to resist. It was about 3 months after I arrived. He called me and I was menstruating. It wasn't a lie, it was true. I thought that maybe, just maybe, that would give me a few days of peace. "I'm feeling unwell," I murmured when Mabruka came to get me. She laughed. A dry, cruel laugh. "He doesn't care. Let's go." But this time I refused. I froze. I sat on the floor and said I wasn't going. What came next was worse than anything. Mabruka dragged me anyway, threw me into his room. He was waiting. And when he saw my refusal, when he realized I had dared to say no, I don't need to describe it. You know, we all know what men like that do when they're contradicted. Then, while I was on the ground, bloody and broken, he spat on me, literally, and laughed. "They'll learn quickly that you have no choice," he said, dressing calmly as if nothing had happened. "You're mine. I do what I want with you." Mabruka locked me in a room alone for 2 days after that. No food, just water. "To think about what you did," she said. "When they released me, Layla took care of me. She cleaned my wounds and held my hand while I cried." "You learn?" she whispered. "Not really, only on the outside. Inside, you keep a little piece that he can't touch, a little piece that's still yours." I tried. I swear I tried. But there are certain things that eat away at you from the inside out, you know? That consume you until there's nothing left. The other girls in the basement became my family. Not a happy family. No one there was happy, but we understood each other. We shared the pain in silence. We exchanged glances that said, "I know," without needing words. There was Amina, who had been a teacher before being kidnapped. She still tried to maintain some dignity, fixing her hair every morning even though she had nowhere to go. There was Fatima, who was so young she still looked like a child. And there were so many others whose names I didn't always learn because they would suddenly disappear, taken to other places or returned to their families when he got tired of them. Being returned wasn't freedom. We knew that. It was just another kind of prison, because how do you go back home after being what we were forced to be? How do you look your family, your community in the face, knowing that to them you're not a victim, you're a disgrace? Time passed and I adapted. I hate that word. Adapt. As if it were possible to get used to the unaccustomed. But the human body is strange like that. It finds ways to survive even when the soul has already given up. I learned to switch off. To leave my body while it was doing what it was doing. I floated up there, looking down, seeing that girl in bed but not being her. It was like watching a bad movie where you hadn't chosen to be. Mabruka was pleased. Finally you learned, she would say, as if I had accomplished something. But the truth is I hadn't learned. I had broken down. And there's a difference. There was a period when he was traveling, whole weeks without being called. We breathed a little deeper during those days. We even laughed sometimes. It felt like the air was lighter when he wasn't at the complex. But the peace never lasted. He always came back, and when he came back, it was worse, as if he needed to make up for lost time, to prove that he still owned everything and everyone. One day, Mabruka came in wearing uniforms, black military uniforms, complete with boots and belts. "So, you're going to start working for real," she announced. "Not just in the bedrooms, outside too." I didn't understand at the time, but it soon became clear he wanted to transform us into the famous revolutionary guards. Those women the world saw in photos, even admired, believing they were symbols of female freedom in Libya. What a joke! We were forced to train, marching, holding weapons, which were more for show than for real use, standing at attention. All of this during the day, and at night, well, at night we went back to being what we really were, his property. They dressed us in tight uniforms, heavy makeup and sunglasses so no one could see the emptiness in our eyes, and he paraded us around the hallways through events and international meetings. "Look," he would say to the foreign visitors proudly, "in Libya, women are respected, protected, and empowered." And they believed it, or pretended to believe it, because it was convenient. I saw the looks on their faces, diplomats, journalists, leaders from other countries. Some seemed genuinely impressed. Others had that glint in their eye that said they knew, that they understood what was happening. But they did nothing, because business is business, oil is oil, and the lives of Libyan girls weren't worth that much. One night, after being dismissed from his room, I went back to the basement and found Layla crying, quietly, tears streaming down her face, silently. "What was that?" I sat down next to her. "My mother died," she whispered. "I heard from one of the guards. She died, and I couldn't even say goodbye. I couldn't even go to the funeral. She died thinking her daughter was. He couldn't finish. He didn't need to. We knew." I held her hand and we stayed like that. Two broken girls in a damp basement, crying over the lives we were no longer allowed to have. And it was at that moment that something changed in me. It wasn't big, it wasn't dramatic, but it was real. A rage, small but growing, like a seed planted deep in my chest. I was going to survive, somehow, because if I died there, he would win completely, and I couldn't let that happen. That night, lying on the hard bed in the basement, listening to Layla's muffled sobs in the dark, I made a promise to myself. One day, somehow, I was going to tell, I was going to expose it. I was going to let the world know, even if it took years, even if it cost me everything. There's a difference between being trapped within 4 walls and being trapped in the whole world. When you're locked in a room, at least you know where the boundaries are. But when they throw you out there, dress you in a uniform of power, put sunglasses on you and a gun on your hip, then the prison becomes invisible. And invisible prisons are the worst because everyone looks and thinks you're free. It was in 2007 that he decided to take me on one of his international trips. A tour of Africa, various countries, various leaders, various events where he could present himself as the great liberator, the revolutionary, the feminist of the Arab world. Feminist. Him. The man who first raped me when I was 15. The man who kept dozens of girls locked in a basement. Feminist. Hypocrisy tasted like bile. They prepared me with special care this time. Mabruka personally supervised everything. New, starched uniforms, smelling of fresh fabric. Boots that were tight but looked powerful. More elaborate makeup. I had to look strong, confident, lethal. "You will represent the revolution," Mabruka said as she adjusted my belt. "You will show the world that Libyan women are warriors, not victims." I almost laughed. Almost. We traveled on his private plane, luxury everywhere, leather seats, expensive food, imported drinks. The other guards were there too. Some I knew from the basement. Others were new, recently chosen, still with that look of someone who hadn't fully grasped the nightmare they'd entered. During the flight, he walked around, chatted with aides, smoked cigars, laughed loudly, and every now and then he would look at me. That look that said, "You're mine." That reminded me that no matter how much I was wearing a uniform, no matter how much power I seemed to have, I had nothing. We landed in the first country. I don't remember which one it was. They all started to blur together in my head, an endless sequence of airports, 5-star hotels, meeting rooms. But I remember the feeling of being there in uniform, armed. The gun didn't have real ammunition, I found out later. It was just a prop. Marching behind him while cameras flashed and people applauded. I remember seeing women in the audience, looking at me with admiration, even with envy, thinking, "Look, in Libya even women are presidential guards. What progress!" If only they knew, if only they had any idea what happened when the cameras were turned off, when the official smiles disappeared, when the hotel room doors locked. By day, I was a symbol. By night, I was property. There was one particular night I'll never forget. We were staying at an absurdly luxurious hotel. Marble everywhere, crystal chandeliers, the kind of place you see in movies. It had the entire presidential suite, and I knew what was coming, but this time I tried something different. It was the right time of the month, so it wasn't a lie. I told one of the assistants that I needed sanitary pads, making it clear that I was menstruating. I thought that maybe in an international setting, with other people around, he would have some kind of limit. I didn't have it. When Mabruka knocked on my bedroom door that night, I said, "Not today." "You know why?" She sighed. Annoyed. "He doesn't care about that. Let's go." But now, it was one of the worst nights. Not because of the physical details. I've learned to dissociate those, to put them in mental boxes I don't open. But because of the added humiliation, because of the awareness that, to him, I was less than human. I was an object. And objects don't have cycles, they don't have needs, they don't have dignity. Then he lit a cigarette, He was always smoking. The smell of tobacco clung to everything, and said in that casual voice, "There's a press conference tomorrow. You'll be in the front row, and you'll be smiling." And I smiled. The next day, with my eyes hidden behind dark glasses, I smiled for all the cameras, because it was that or put my family at risk, it was that or make everything worse. Throughout that tour, I met people I never imagined I would meet: heads of state, diplomats, business people, important people, powerful people, and some new. You could see it. In the sidelong glances, in the conversations that stopped when we entered, in the knowing smiles between men. They knew that those revolutionary guards were a facade. They knew what was happening behind the scenes, but they said nothing. Because political expediency is more important than girls' lives. There was one moment that stuck with me. We were leaving an official meeting and I saw a guy, Western, in an expensive suit, with the look of an important politician. He looked at me, then at the guide, and made a comment that I couldn't quite hear, but it made the men around him laugh. That kind of masculine laugh that you know isn't innocent. And nobody said anything. Nobody did anything. That's when I truly understood. The world knew. Maybe not the specific details, but they knew something was wrong, and they chose to look the other way. Oil is more important than morals. Business is more important than justice. And Libyan girls? Well, we didn't care. In the middle of the tour, during a stop in Paris, something unexpected happened. I managed to get a moment alone. It was brief, very brief. Minutes, maybe. Mabruka had gone to sort something out with the delegation, and I went to a hotel bathroom, a public bathroom, full of normal people living normal lives. I looked in the mirror. I saw my reflection, the uniform, the makeup, the mask I had become. And for the first time in a long time, I cried in public, right there in the bathroom of a French hotel with women washing their hands beside me. I cried. One of them looked at me, worried. Are you all right?" he asked in French, which I understood a little. I almost told her. The words were right there, on the tip of my tongue. "Help me, get me out of here. I'm trapped. I'm a slave." I almost said it, but then I thought of my mother, my father, the threats Mabruka made every time a girl thought about running away. "Your family will pay, you'll disappear. And no one will ever know what happened." So I dried my tears, forced a smile, and said, "I'm fine, just tired." And I went back to hell willingly, because I had no choice. The tour eventually ended. We went back to Libya, to the compound, to the basement. Some of the girls who had gone with me seemed worse after the trip, seeing the world out there, seeing the freedom we could never have. It breaks you in a different way. Layla asked me how it had been. "Empty," I replied. "It's all empty." But something had changed in me during that trip. Having seen the world, having seen that there was life beyond those walls, had planted something, a small seed of resistance, of anger, of a desire to truly live one day. I started paying attention to the conversations I heard in the hallways, to the whispers between guards, to the tension that sometimes gripped the complex. Something was changing in Libya. A sense of unease in the air, protests in other Arab countries, revolutions beginning, and although it seemed impossible, distant, unreal, a part of me began to have hope. Hope is dangerous for those who are imprisoned because it hurts. It makes you dream of things that may never happen. But it is also hope that keeps you alive when everything else has died. so I kept it. Tiny, hidden deep inside, where neither Mabruka nor he nor anyone else could see it. And I kept waiting, but this time I was expecting something different. I was waiting for a chance. The smell of gunpowder has a way of clinging to your throat. It's acrid, burns a little, leaves a metallic taste in your mouth. I had never smelled it before, but at the beginning of 2011, that smell became part of the routine because Libya was on fire. Literally, the Arab Spring had arrived. Tunisia fell, Egypt fell, and now it was our turn. At first, down in the basement, and we didn't really understand what was happening. We heard sounds, distant explosions, bursts of gunfire, screams, but nobody told us anything. The Bab al-Azizia complex became an even more closed-off fortress. Nervous guards, frantic movement, urgent meetings. And he became different, more aggressive, more violent, as if he needed to prove that he still had control over something, since he was losing control of everything. The summonses became more frequent and more brutal. He took his anger out on us, and we endured it, as always. But there was something in the air, a change. The guards themselves, the ones who had always been loyal, began to whisper amongst themselves. Some disappeared, deserted, fled the compound before it was too late. Mabruka also grew more tense. She still ruled everything with an iron fist, but you could see the fear in her eyes. Fear of what would happen if the regime fell, of what they would do to her, to all those who collaborated. One night, we heard explosions very close by. The building shook. Layla grabbed me, her eyes wide. "This is different," she whispered. "This is real." And it was. The rebels were advancing. Tripoli was being taken. And the great guide, the invincible leader, was fleeing. It was one morning in August that we woke up and realized the complex was almost empty. Many guards had left. There was less movement, fewer orders, less control. And then the basement door, for the first time in all those years, was open, not locked, just open. The girls looked at each other. No one knew what to do. Was it a trap? A test? Would someone shoot if we went out? But Amina, the oldest of us, stood up. "I'm not going to die here," she said simply. "If they're going to kill me, let it be out there, looking at the sky." And she left. We waited, tense, ready to hear gunshots. Nothing. Then another girl left, then another, and finally, Layla and I. We climbed the stairs, those same stairs we had descended countless times only to be abused, but now we were climbing them to escape. Up there it was chaos. Papers were scattered on the floor, furniture was overturned, windows were broken. Some guards were still there, but they didn't care about us. They were more concerned with saving their own skins. We went out onto the patio. The sun beat down on my face and I almost collapsed. How long had it been since I'd last seen the real sun? How long had I been trapped in that darkness? The streets of Tripoli were pure chaos. Gunfire, screams, burning cars, people running. Green flags of the regime were being torn down and replaced with rebel flags. It was war, but for me, it was liberation. Layla and I parted ways there. She had family in another city and wanted to try to come back. We hugged, cried, and promised to meet again someday. I don't know if she succeeded. I never saw her again. I wandered the streets for days, sleeping in abandoned buildings, picking up food wherever I could, trying to understand that this was real, that I was free, that he wasn't going to send for me to come back. It happened in October. I was in a cheap hotel, sharing a room with other women displaced by the war, when someone turned on the TV shouting, "They got him! They got Gaddafi!" Everyone rushed into the room. And there he was in the shaky cell phone images, looping. Him, bloodied, terrified, being dragged away by rebels. The man who thought himself a god, who thought himself invincible, reduced to a pathetic creature begging for mercy. And then, minutes later, dead. The room erupted in celebration. People were hugging, crying with joy, shouting, "Allahu Akbar." But all I could do was stand there, staring at the screen. He was dead. The monster was dead. I should be happy, right? Relieved, truly free, now. But all I felt was emptiness, because his death didn't erase what he did. It didn't give me back my childhood. It didn't heal the traumas. It didn't make my family accept me back. Yes, because when I tried to go back to Sirte, when I knocked on my mother's door, she hugged me and cried. But she also made it clear I couldn't stay. The neighbors would find out. People would talk. I was a disgrace now. Marked, dirty. You understand, right? Habibti? My mother cried. It's not that I don't love you, but society, people, I understand. Of course I understand. In Libya, a rape victim is guilty. An abuse victim is dishonored. It doesn't matter that you were kidnapped at 15. It doesn't matter that you were forced. You are impure now, and impurity is contagious. I went back to Tripoli. I managed to get a tiny room. I tried to find work, but how? I hadn't finished school. You had no skills, no references. All you had was trauma and shame. It was one afternoon in October, more than a week after his death, that I met Annick, a French journalist who was investigating his crimes. Someone recommended me to her, saying I had a story to tell. At first I refused. To speak out meant to expose myself. It meant confirming to everyone that, yes, I was one of those girls, one of his slaves, and in Libya that was a social death sentence. But Annick was persistent, kind. She didn't judge me. She just listened. And on a day when I was particularly exhausted, particularly tired of carrying that burden alone, I told her. I told them everything. From the day at school, the touch on the head, the kidnapping, the dessert, the basement, the abuse, the trips, the hypocrisy, Mabruka, the other girls, the empty liberation. She recorded it. She took notes. She cried with me. "You are very brave," she said when I finished. But I didn't feel brave. I felt destroyed. "No one can know it was me," I warned. "My real name can't appear. Please." She understood. She called me Soraya in the book she wrote later. A name that wasn't mine, but that carried my story. When the book came out, when her article was published, the reaction was divided. In the Western world, shock, outrage, support. But in Libya, silence, denial, anger, not against him, against me, against us, the victims who dared to speak. She's lying to make money? She was there because she wanted to be. She dishonors the country with these stories. I expected it, but it hurt just the same. Today, years later, I still carry it all. The nightmares, the triggers, the way my body freezes when someone touches my shoulder without warning, the way certain smells take me back to that basement. He is dead, but he lives on in me, in the invisible scars, in the fear that won't go away, in the shame that society insists on placing upon me. There are days when I can breathe. There are days when I wake up and remember that he can't hurt me anymore. On those days, I almost feel human. There are other days when the weight is too much. When I look in the mirror and only see the broken 15-year-old girl. When I wonder if I'll ever be whole again. But I survived. Against all odds, I survived. And now, by telling you this, I'm doing what he never wanted me to do. I'm speaking out. I'm exposing him. I'm taking away his power over me. Because silence is what they want. Silence maintains the system. Silence protects the monsters and condemns the victims. And I'm not going to stay silent anymore, not just for myself, but for the hundreds of other girls who went through what I went through and who are still afraid to speak. For those who died without ever having had a voice. For those who are still out there carrying shame that isn't theirs. This is my story. This is our story. And she deserves to be heard.
Soraya's story, a pseudonym to protect her identity, is just one among hundreds of Libyan women and girls who were victims of a systematized system of sexual abuse, used as a weapon of power and control by Muammar Gaddafi during his more than 40 years of dictatorship. Annick Cojean, the French journalist from Le Monde, who courageously investigated and exposed these atrocities, faced resistance not only from Gaddafi's regime, but also from Libyan society itself after the dictator's fall. In a culture where rape is an absolute taboo and where victims are often blamed, giving voice to these women was a revolutionary act. The book that resulted from this investigation, Gaddafi's Harem, sold over 100,000 copies in France alone and was translated into several languages, including Arabic, allowing even Libyans access to truths that many preferred to ignore. But beyond the numbers, beyond the statistics, are real lives. Women like Soraya who, at 22, felt like they were 42. Women who survived hell but continue to fight daily against the ghosts of the past. Women who dared to break the silence even knowing they would be judged, rejected, marginalized. Many of these women will never tell their stories. They live in anonymity, carrying alone the weight of traumas that society refuses to acknowledge. Some were killed by family members, victims of honor killings, because in a sexist and patriarchal culture, family honor is worth more than a woman's life. Others, like Soraya, managed to find some form of healing. Not a complete cure, because certain traumas never fully heal, but a partial cure. The cure that comes from naming the horror, from bringing it out of the darkness, from transforming shame into anger, and anger into action. Gaddafi's death in October 2011 brought a bloody chapter to a close in Libyan history, but it did not erase its consequences. It did not restore the stolen childhood of the Harem girls. It did not heal the destroyed families. It did not rebuild the shattered lives. And perhaps most tragically, it hasn't fundamentally changed the culture that allowed this to happen, a culture where women are property, where rape is a shame for the victim, not the perpetrator, where power is confused with the right of ownership over female bodies. Today, more than a decade after the fall of the regime, Libya is still struggling to find stability. And women, especially those who survived the horrors of Gaddafi's harem, are still fighting for recognition, for justice, for dignity. Soraya's story reminds us that dictatorships don't just destroy economies and political institutions, they destroy lives, soul by soul, body by body, childhood by childhood. It also reminds us that bearing witness is an act of courage, that speaking out when everyone wants silence is revolutionary. That surviving against all odds is a form of resistance. But above all, it makes us ask an uncomfortable question. How many Sorayas are there in the world right now? How many girls are being abused by powerful men while the world looks the other way? How many times do we choose political expediency over human justice? If you were impacted by this story, if you felt anger, sadness, indignation, good, it means you still have empathy. It means that stories like this still matter. Now do something with that feeling. Educate yourself about abuse of power, question structures that protect abusers, believe survivors when they speak out, and never, ever underestimate the cost of silence. This was just one part of Soraya's incredible and painful journey. To learn all the details, with the depth and sensitivity that this story deserves, read the book Gaddafi's Harem by journalist Annick Cojean, available in several languages. And if you care about stories of women who faced the unimaginable and survived to tell the tale, subscribe to our channel. Because these stories need to be told, these voices need to be heard, and this silence needs to be broken, and you. If you were in Soraya's position, would you have found the strength to speak when the whole world preferred you to remain silent? Would you have the courage to transform your deepest pain into an instrument of change, knowing that you would be judged and rejected for it? Courage is not the absence of fear. It's speaking up even when everything calls for silence. It's surviving even when it would be easier to give up. It's believing that your story matters even when society says otherwise. Soraya did it. And in doing so, she freed not only herself, but also gave a voice to all those who are still unable to speak. Comment below what you thought of this story. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who is experiencing some kind of abuse, someone who feels silenced, someone who thinks they will never overcome the trauma, share it. Because stories save lives, and collective voices change the world. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring.